It's the Fitness Lab Pittsburgh podcast, a new episode every week. A podcast about movement, part of making your life complete. Fitness Lab Pittsburgh, aka FitLabPGH, brings you interviews with people in the Pittsburgh area who understand movement is part of what makes life complete. Looking for a new movement idea or just want to hear interesting stories about people who make movement a priority? This is the podcast for you. Whether you consider the gym, dojo, or fitness studio your third place, or just want to learn more about movement, activity, and fitness to enhance your life, give FitLabPGH a listen. We interview locals in the Pittsburgh area who make Pittsburgh a great place to move. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Subscribing is free and gives you notifications when we release new episodes. Each podcast episode will be long enough to pique your interest and short enough to hold your attention. Have an idea for an episode? Know somebody we should interview? Or just want to connect with us? Drop us an email, fitlabpgh@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram at fitlabpgh. Already a fan of FitLabPGH? Check out our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast for movement professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers weekly interviews with movement professionals featuring topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoy our next interview, starting now. FitLabPGH back with another podcast. This time we have gone over a bridge and crossed a river. We haven't gone through a tunnel, and we are in Sewickley. We are talking to two individuals who I'm not sure how we found them. I think probably the way we find a lot of our guests is we stalk them on social media and see pictures on Facebook or on Instagram and say, ooh, that looks like an interesting person or an organization to interview for FitLab Pittsburgh, because movement is part of what makes your life complete. I am a big biker, as you've probably seen on pictures that I post on Instagram, and we are fortunate enough to be with Lauren McGurk and Jason Harrison. They are iBike at QV being Quaker Valley, and they teach individuals with disabilities how to bicycle. So Lauren and Jason, thanks for taking time to talk to FitLabPGH.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
My question I always like to start out the FitLabPGH interviews with is, are you a Pittsburgh native? If you are, why are you still here? If you're not, what brought you here? So we'll start with you, Jason.
I am. I was born in McKeesport and absolutely love Pittsburgh. Moved to the other side. Live out near the airport now, and with no intentions of moving. I think, I don't know, I'm here to stay.
Lauren?
My story is fairly similar. I'm from the South Hills, Jefferson Hills. And then I got my first teaching job at Quaker Valley in Sewickley. So after college, I went to Penn State and I did move home, and I've never really considered leaving Pittsburgh. So born and raised.
And as somebody who's not a Pittsburgh native, I have to ask, Lauren, do people that you grew up with, when you tell them you work all the way up in Sewickley, do they look at you kind of strangely and say, wow, that's a long way away?
Yes. I have several friends that are now raising their families a few miles from where we graduated high school. And my parents still live in the house I grew up in. So crossing over rivers and going through tunnels to get to their house is a huge pain.
And there's no chance that they'll come and visit you fairly frequently because of those bridges and tunnels.
I hope so, but Route 51 is a bear, and the Liberty Bridge is always under construction.
So what I also like to find out, you are teaching individuals how to bicycle. Are you both active? Were you active growing up? So Lauren, were you active growing up, or is this just something as you started in your job, you said, this is something I want to do?
I was very active playing sports, specifically volleyball and basketball, and just always outside doing stuff. But I was never, ever a biker. It actually took me a while to learn how to ride a bike. It took me a while for my parents to remove the training wheels. And as an adult, biking is not something I do in my spare time. I enjoy more of, I'm a runner. I enjoy yoga, bar, but I don't own a bicycle.
The question I'm always interested with people who are active is, and we find that as you get to be an adult, when people are active, they're in two categories. Either they started becoming active after they became adults, or they've been active all their life. We've had a number of people we've talked about who they went to college and they really experienced college and then realized, ooh, I need to do something. So in your case, Lauren, active growing up, is this something that your parents were also active? So was there a family history of being active, or is this just something, well, you're a kid, you're going to play sports, and mom and dad just kind of sat there and watched?
I think looking back, my parents were active as well as all of my siblings. And it was just encouraged as well to go outside and play, to run around, to get away from the TV. But I remember, having family bike rides when we were little, or all going to the park, playing wiffle ball, things like that. So my parents set a good example.
Jason, what about you? Were you active growing up? Became active?
I was an athlete. Played baseball growing up. It was middle school, picked up playing football, and was very successful. We won a state championship in 1994 with McKeesport. First team all conference, second team all district, the whole deal. Had some offers from Allegheny and W&J, more like academic oriented schools. Didn't pursue it beyond that. Went to school for education and, stayed active. Never a real bike enthusiast. Just within the past couple of years, got a bike and trying to push it now. I have two kids, 9 and 11, and kind of want to set that example for them.
Kind of curious. I know a lot of people when they graduate from high school, and if they have the opportunity to play sports in college, are like, yeah, I want to do this. And I know you have a number of students that you work with too as a teacher, and you probably experience people who have unrealistic expectations. They think they're going to make their living playing sports. What was it when you finished high school that allowed you to say, okay, this is it, rather than, boy, I'm going to go to college, maybe I'll get to keep going?
Right. We had such great success. I mean, we went 15-0, starting to sound like Al Bundy, Polk High, but I felt as though, I kind of hit that pinnacle, and I know at the collegiate level, it kind of becomes more of a job, so to speak. And I really just wanted to concentrate on my studies. I don't know if I didn't trust myself to do both. But I think ultimately I made the right decision. I could have, had access to the education of, like, again, a W&J or an Allegheny, but did well at IUP. And happy with my career choice at this point.
And just like I asked Lauren, was your family active also, or just kind of, let's go watch Jason play sports?
I would say they encouraged it. They encouraged my activities more so than being active themselves.
And now that you have kids of your own, are you encouraging them to be active, or are you participating with them?
I am. So I am 40, and it was around like 36 or 37. I kind of, saw it coming. So kind of made an effort to be more active myself. So.
Interesting question. I always like to ask people that we interview for FitLab Pittsburgh. I know some people, we interviewed one lady who, before we started recording, she said, I'm not an athlete. I like a lot of the people you interview. But if you move around on a regular basis, you are an athlete, and you're basically putting health in the bank for as you get older. So for both of you, is there some activity that you've done in the past that's like, wow, this is, like Jason told us about his 15-0 high school team, but one of the things we like to hear is there something that you like to brag about? If you're at a faculty meeting or you're hanging out with your buddies, like, yeah, I did this. Like, we've had a couple of people said, I went skydiving. It's like, okay, that's great for you. I have no interest in doing that.
I just did it for my 40th birthday in September. And I mean, it was great. I would recommend it to anybody.
So my second question for that is, would you do it again?
Yes. Yeah. And that was it. It was like, I definitely wanted to try it once, but I had that same question myself. It's just like, would I do it again? And absolutely. So I plan on doing it at least once a year from here on out.
I think George Bush Sr., when he was 85, started skydiving. Every 5 years, he did it as a tandem. So
yes,
it's a lifetime sport.
It is.
Lauren, what about you? Is there any activity that you did, or maybe your volleyball team went 16-0?
Sure. So nothing like the 94 McKeesport football team, apparently. But as an adult, I ran the Pittsburgh Marathon in 2012, and I did it by myself, trained independently, And that was a really special thing and really important to me, and I couldn't cross it off my bucket list.
So no plans to do it again?
I don't think so. It's honestly extremely time consuming. I'm so impressed that people do it multiple times a year or annually. It was very time consuming for me and very demanding. And I'm currently going back to school at Pitt right now, and I just don't think I have the time, but I'm currently just doing 5Ks a few times a week. So that's good enough for now.
And the other question I like to ask everybody that we interview, because we are a podcast about movement, is there something on your bucket list movement related at some point in time you want to do? Everything from, some people have said skydiving. I've said this before. My bucket list activity is I want to do a rim to rim 1 day hike of the Grand Canyon. And since starting doing this, I've started to make plans to figure out how to do it. I've actually learned the hardest part is finding lodging on the North Shore, or I'm sorry, the North Rim, because it's only open from May 15th to October 15th. And I don't want to do it past May or before October begins, because it can be 110 degrees at the base of the canyon. So it's a planning thing. So for you, Lauren, is there something on your list? You've done the Pittsburgh Marathon, something else movement related? It's like, I'm going to do this at some point when I'm done with school, when I have more time.
I think just hiking out west somewhere. My brother lives in Arizona, so I've done a lot of the mountains out there. Camelback was my most recent one that was amazing. I was just at the Finger Lakes a few weeks ago and doing some of the New York state parks. I really enjoy it, and I would love to get out west or other parts of the United States and experience those trails as well.
It was amazing. When I did Camelback, there was a gentleman who had to be 65 or 70 who basically went downhill at about 3 times the pace that I did and looked like he was barely moving, and I'm turning sideways and trying to avoid falling. So I think it's really impressive with Camelback. I think anybody who's never had the opportunity to do it, if you're active, it's a whole lot of fun. Mm-hmm. Jason, what about you? Bucket list other than skydiving every year?
So I was out at Ohio Pile last week and did some whitewater rafting with my brother-in-law and nephews. And it's our second summer doing it. And I would like to take it on as more of a individual hobby. Not so much the whitewater rafting, but kayaking. Would love to do it, and got to talking to some of the guides, and it seems, pretty easy. And, something like that, it seems like everybody's willing to help,
And you're a fairly quick ride up to Slippery Rock Creek if you had a few hours.
Yes, absolutely.
So both of you are involved in the way we became aware of it with iBike at Quaker Valley. For people who don't understand what this is, obviously it involves something with a bike, but if you see somebody, and Jason's got an iBike t-shirt on right now, you see somebody in Giant Eagle, or you're standing downtown at a fair or something, and somebody says, "What the heck is iBike at QV?" What do you tell them?
So iBike at QV is the Quaker Valley. We are both educators at the Quaker Valley School District, and QV plays host to I Can Shine. It's a national nonprofit, and they teach students with disabilities how to learn how to ride a bike, and they supply the equipment and the know-how, and we host them for a week long, and we host 20 riders per week, and we need the help of about 50 volunteers, and within that week, about 80% of our riders are successful.
And one of the things you told us before we started recording is each of the riders leaves with a bike and a helmet too.
That's correct. We've been very fortunate with our fundraising and with the help. We've written grants and acquired grants from Target. And with that money, we purchased bicycles from a local bike shop, Sweetwater Bikes, located in Ambridge on Merchant. And that's exactly it. Each family leaves with a bike.
And the other thing that you said that I think is important to emphasize is the fact that it does not cost the kids any amount of money to go to the camp or to leave with a bicycle. Is a camp a correct terminology?
It is. And again, because we've been so fortunate, not only with Target, but with American Eagle and with Dick's Sporting Goods, we've been able to keep it tuition free with families. I think a lot of camps throughout the country would charge, I think, what is average, about like $150 per family. So it's the least we can do, for our families with, with our students with disabilities.
And one of the things that I found was very interesting with this is, in addition to it being free, is there an age limit? So what's the age of people? Do kids have to be a minimum age? Is there a maximum age?
So the minimum age is 8, so right around a second, third grader. And there's also a minimum inseam of 20 inches. So that's really just the height of a rider. And there is no maximum age. So in talking with the I Can Shine staff that we've met over the years, they have worked with riders 60, 70 years old. They have taught adults with special needs how to ride a bike successfully. And those adults are now riding their bike to work every day. The oldest rider we have had, I believe, is 18. We did have a rider this year sign up who was 40.
I'm going to say 55.
55. His sister signed him up. He's an adult male with special needs, but he also suffers from dementia. So the I Can Shine staff and his sister were worried that those skills he would forget and have to learn every day. So unfortunately, he did not participate this year.
And Jason, you mentioned I Can Shine does a variety of physical activities, teaching people with disabilities, a variety, and Quaker Valley specifically does biking. So how did the two of you start with this? I'm assuming there's other people involved, but you two are the spearheads and the leaders. Did you wake up one day and kind of see each other at work and say, hey, let's teach kids how to ride bikes? Or was there something more to that?
So Lauren at the time was my cohort at the elementary building. We were both life skills teachers.
Some of us are ignorant and some of our listeners may not know. What is a life skills teacher?
So we teach students with more significant disabilities. So a large part of my roster is students with autism or Down syndrome. And Lauren came to me the one day and said, we should really consider doing something kind of outside the classroom walls. And I had recently spoken with a physical therapist, and she had mentioned I Can Shine. So, it's like, well, why don't we at least look into it? And once you look into it and you start to read about what I Can Shine offers, you become hooked. And it just, you start to read about, 80% of students with Down syndrome or 90% of students with autism never learn how to ride. And there, after talking a little bit, we said, okay, well, how can we make this happen? Sewickley is, a rather affluent area, well-to-do, and started looking around and saying, you know what, we have a lot of connections here, a lot of fantastic families, whether, they're parents or families of kids in our classroom or otherwise. How can we start to get this together? How can we get people on board and, make it happen? And that's kind of how it started.
What made you say we need to do something outside of the classroom, Lauren? Because I know you can read in the papers and you hear about teachers talking about how overworked they are and how busy they are and they don't have time to do other things. And from what you and Jason have described before we started recording, not only is it the 5 days of camp, but it's the leading up to it. It's the writing of grants. Having written grants, that's time consuming and you may not get them. So what was it that made you say, we should do something outside of the classroom?
Jason likes to give me credit for the idea, but it might have been him. We initially started with this wild idea of calling it clinics and offering an after school or an evening activity with a different focus every month. So maybe in September we would have a professional photographer come in and do a photography class with our kids with special needs. And then the next month we might focus on basketball. So we definitely wanted to consider the inclusion piece of that and how we could get the regular education peers involved as well, so that our kids with special needs were interacting with their typical aged peers. That was really important to us. And then shortly after that, I would say a few weeks or so, Jason had come across I Can Shine, and I initially thought it was just crazy. And then when we thought, let's make this opportunity free, I really didn't think that would be possible either, because it's about $15,000. That was all in about October, and we had our first camp at the end of that July the following year. So working with a lot of the parents in the community, working with some administrators within Quaker Valley, we quickly received the support that we needed. and encouragement as well, and kind of the green light. And I think it's important to know that we clearly enjoy what we do every day. We clearly have a special place for people with special needs in our hearts, and we wanted to provide them with opportunities that everyone else gets. And we didn't think it was appropriate that just because they have these different disabilities that they wouldn't be afforded these opportunities.
And Jason, you said you became aware of I Can Shine from a physical therapist. What was it that made you decide bicycling or biking is what we're going to do?
You know what? I was sitting in an IEP meeting. That's an individualized education plan meeting. All students with disabilities have one in public education. And the mother, Lauren and I had both what I feel is great success within the classroom walls. Our students were learning how to read and speak and interact and math and so on. And she had mentioned I would love for my daughter to learn how to ride a bike, which kind of sparked the conversation and introduced I Can Shine into the equation. That was the easy part, is, finding out about it and looking it up. The hard part was, putting it into action. And one of the first things Lauren and I did was put together a board, again, with some Quaker Valley administrators and Quaker Valley parents. And parents with experience, of how to fundraise and how to, run such a thing. With their help, we were able to pull it off.
And this is, Lauren, if I'm correct, the 4th year that you've done it. You just finished up the 4th camp?
4th year, but our first year was so amazing and so incredible that we decided for our 2nd year, we wanted to do 2 weeks of camp, because with our middle school gym, it's just a traditional size basketball court gym. So we can only have 4 riders in there per session. So we can only serve 20 riders. But if we move to, say, a high school gym or an ice hockey rink that they would cover with wood floor, we would be able to serve 40 riders. So 8 riders per session. So we thought, well, we can't serve 40 in a week. Why don't we serve 40 over 2 weeks? So yes, we just finished our 4th year, but it was actually our 5th camp.
And you decided after the 2nd year doing 2 sessions of camp was just too much with all the other things.
Sure. In terms of funding, I think it's definitely doable. It wasn't that much more difficult, especially recruiting over 80 volunteers for those 2 weeks to help the riders out. And we have considered and explored options of moving our camp to possibly a different facility that would be big enough to hold 8 riders per session. But that's really all it's been, just conversation about it.
So this is entirely free for the camp participants. It's not only for Quaker Valley students, because as you said, there's not an age limit as far as the maximum. There's an age limit of 8 and an inseam of 20 inches, I'm assuming, for the bike. How do you find kids? Because as you said, I would imagine that there are a number of children with special needs in Quaker Valley, but after a year or two, maybe you exhaust all the kids who either don't know how to ride a bicycle or want to ride a bike, because we know some people just don't want to ride.
Yeah, that really is the easy part. I mean, the need exists. There are cities, I want to say it was Denver, that may host 2 or 3 camps. Pittsburgh didn't have any at the time. And introducing such a thing to the Pittsburgh area, I think it was very welcomed. I mean, it's easy to find our riders. One of the avenues that we use often is the Down Syndrome Society of Western Pennsylvania has an email blast, and Sheila Cannon is able to reach out to, thousands of family at once. And, if we're ever short riders, and I think we already have about 15 names on next year's waiting list. If we're ever short, that email blast helps us out a ton.
Somebody's listening to this, and I know some individuals who have Down syndrome have balance issues, depending on, it's not my area of expertise, but what are the requirements as far as physically for somebody to be able to come as a camper? You talked about this a little bit before we started recording.
So to date, we have not attempted to teach any child or adult that is in a wheelchair how to ride a bicycle. Obviously, specific physical disabilities might make it really difficult. We had a rider a few years ago. We've had a few actually with severe scoliosis, and that has made the balance difficult, obviously, because they're leaning one way or the other on the bike. We've also had some riders that recently had spinal fusions, like different surgeries, that it's just too dangerous, too high risk.
The rider must be able to sidestep as well. So without the ability to sidestep, that could also, that could eliminate.
Would it be correct to say if somebody's listening to this and they say, I have a child or I know somebody I think this might be good for, contact you and then you discuss it and decide if that was something, rather than for them listening and saying, oh, well, they can't do it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we would be willing to accept anybody who could qualify. Sure.
How does this actually work? You were describing there are special tools or equipment. You were described it, Jason, kind of as a rolling pin. So we're not video, but we are audio. Kind of describe how a typical, and I know every rider is different, but how a typical teaching somebody to ride over the course of a week works.
Sure. So I Can Shine brings in their special equipment, and they have a whole trailer full of bikes with basically the back wheel looks like a French rolling pin. And as the week progresses, the taper on the back wheel also progresses. So it's basically transferring the balance from the back roller to the rider. And once that rider is, firm enough and has demonstrated that they have the ability to balance somewhat, then I Can Shine, also uses their expertise and their know-how. And then they eventually get up on two wheels. Even before the two wheels, however, they put them on a tandem bike as well. And the tandem allows the I Can Shine staff to kind of feel the rider's tendencies, whether he or she's leaning too far to the left, to the right, not turning, not focusing, not pedaling. So once they kind of assess that rider's abilities, they get them up on a two-wheel bike with a handle, and with that, they help guide them around the gym, eventually onto the track outside. And, before you know it, it's Thursday and we have a lot of riders up and independent, and we have our spotters running with them. Before you know it, you have, your independent riders.
And is this something that you've tracked, where individuals who've taken the camp the first or second year, that people have communicated with you that they're still riding? Or is that something you haven't had any opportunity to follow up on?
We communicate frequently with past riders. We often, every year we've hosted a fall bike ride. So it's just a fun opportunity for the riders and their families to come and enjoy a fall day riding bikes around the track in a safe place. And we also invite the volunteers to come as well, because parents shouldn't have the expectation that after my child leaves camp, they're 120% independent. We're ready for the Montour Trail. And that's an important message that Jason and I have to share with parents, because, moving from a track to having, people running next to you, providing that support and assurance, to a public place where you really need to pay attention to distractors and to when you should be braking and slowing down, things like that. Those are learned skills and really difficult for new bike riders, obviously. So we're constantly in communication with the parents. We share the volunteer information with the parents after camp so that they have some support in assisting their rider. And I don't recall the whole question. I may have got off topic.
Just how many, if you've kept track of how many people who have gone through the camp are still riding?
Our first year, 14 of our 20 riders were Quaker Valley students. So, we keep regular contact with them. And, we've gotten the stories, we've gotten the photos at the beach, washing off the beach bike, after a ride, or, stories about the Montour Trail. So we have kept in touch with quite a bit. Again, our fall bike ride is, a big event where we welcome back our families.
It's also, parents often share with one another a nice, private quiet place to ride. So a specific like church parking lot that might be open Monday through Friday in the evenings, school tracks, but not all tracks obviously allow you to ride your bike, school parking lots. So that's a nice communication that we can share with parents and that parents have with one another, because that is a difficult thing to sometimes find, especially for our riders that live in the city.
Yeah, but it is that practice after camp that is a lot of times going to be pivotal, whether or not that rider does eventually become independent. Our volunteers also sign up to help post camp. You know, some of the families, some of the parents can't even keep up with a rider, don't have the physical ability to do so. So some of our volunteers really step up post camp as well.
And you've talked about this quite a bit. You need volunteers. So this is your opportunity. I'll put you on the spot if you know the date of next year's camp yet. Otherwise, our show notes will have a link to your website and people will be able to watch. But kind of this is your opportunity to explain why you need volunteers and what they get out of it as far as the opportunity to participate.
I can tell you that's probably the one reason why we would not move a camp for a bigger venue, is because our volunteers here in Sewickley are just the best. I'd say, I don't know if I had to guess, 60% of our volunteers, 70% of our volunteers are either Quaker Valley families or Quaker Valley students. But we are always heading into camp. It seems like, 10, 15 volunteers short.
You need how many volunteers to hold a camp?
That we need a minimum of 40, but we've been shooting for 50, 60.
And this is something you want them to participate all 5 days. You don't want to retrain volunteers.
That's correct. And actually that relationship that the volunteer builds with the rider, again, is very pivotal for the success. I mean, they bring the excitement, they bring the energy, each and every day. And a lot of times, our students with disabilities have a lot of anxiety that revolves around a new activity. I mean, bike riding's not easy. It's dangerous. And it's our volunteers that, get them in the door, get their helmet on, and, get them on the bike and ready to go. So, yeah, we do ask that our volunteers commit. It's a 75-minute session. So we're asking for about an hour and a half each day, Monday through Friday. There's a short orientation the Sunday prior to camp. And I mean, honestly, that's probably one of the most unspoken benefits of our camp, is that the benefit that the volunteers take. I mean, they're really such an integral part of reaching that milestone of, teaching these kids how to learn to ride a bike. And I mean, I know it's been really enlightening for a lot of our volunteers as well. And we have a large portion of our volunteers that do return.
Question that's probably really important to get answered is, what does it take to be a volunteer? So somebody's listening to this and says, I think Lauren referred to the fact that there is some running involved, since some of the riders are going to become fairly skilled and you're going to have to run after them or with them. So kind of describe, somebody may be listening, maybe they can take time off from a job, or maybe it's a college student who says, this sounds like something I might like to do.
So you're only really running if that's something you feel comfortable with. We know that that's not for everyone. And we do have riders that are slow pedalers or take a little bit longer to get up on two wheels. And usually those are the riders that need a lot of encouragement and a lot of reinforcement. So just anyone willing to come with a positive attitude, to have zero judgment, and just to have a good time. It's a really awesome week. It's an amazing opportunity. If anyone needs volunteer hours, we typically offer like 10 to 20 just for that week of participating. There are opportunities, though, if you do feel comfortable jogging, running, if you are an avid exerciser or athlete, there may be opportunities for you to be outside running alongside your rider. But usually it's like a half lap or a quarter lap around the track. But we have filled in before and have nearly pulled muscles because we are just sprinting so fast around the track because our bikers are just so successful.
Every year I say I'm going to train for it, and I always regret that I didn't.
Minimum age for somebody to be a volunteer?
The minimum age is like 14, 15. If you are under the age of 16, then we pair you with someone 16, 18 or older. But some of our best volunteers have been the younger middle school or high school kids that just develop amazing relationships with their riders.
We've been talking to Lauren McGurk and Jason Harrison. They are the co-founders, I guess we could say, of iBike at Quaker Valley, which is teaching individuals with disabilities how to bike, and the individuals, for no cost to themselves, leave with a bicycle. We'll have extensive show notes with their website if you are looking for something to do next summer, since they've already had their camp this year. Consider that an hour and a half, 2 hours a day for 5 days. Also think about the fact that if you're looking for something to give a contribution to, they give each of these kids a bicycle, and that costs money. So keep that in mind too. I know I always enjoyed my biking, and I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to both of you. Thanks for talking to FitLabPGH.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of FitLabPGH, brought to you by Moving to Live. Intro and exit music is Marathon Man by Jason Shaw. Check out the show notes for contact info for our latest guests, links to other information mentioned in the episode, and links to our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise for professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Your free subscription gets you notified when we release a new episode. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email us at fitlabpgh@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at fitlabpgh and like us on Facebook. If you enjoy our podcasts, please tell your friends about us and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Make FitLabPGH a go-to place to learn more about movement in the Pittsburgh area. Until next time, keep on moving.